So we're going to do the comparative advantage model and use some simple numbers to illustrate the principle of comparative advantage, absolute advantage, and gains from trade. So we have here two countries, Argentina and Brazil, that produce two products, meat and soybeans. And the numbers here are the amount that one worker can produce. So it's the productivity. So in Argentina, one worker produces 4 tons, the units don't matter, 4 tons, let's say, of meat, or 8 tons of soy, whereas in Brazil, one worker produces 5 tons of meat and 16 tons of soy. So Brazil is more productive in meat. Worker produces 5 tons, while in Argentina a worker produces 4 tons, and Brazil is also more productive in soy. A worker produces 16 tons compared with 8. So Brazil, we would say, has a has an absolute advantage in meat, and also has an absolute advantage in soy. So Brazil is better at producing both of them. For thinking about comparative advantage, we ask, which one is it that Brazil is more better at? And plainly, Brazil is more better at soy. Brazil's productivity advantage is double. All right, Brazil produces 16, Argentina produces 8, whereas when we look at meat and do the comparison between the two, Brazil only produces a little bit more than Argentina, so it's not as good at producing meat as it is at producing soy relative to Argentina. So it's a kind of double comparison. We might ask, well, Argentina is worse at producing both. In which does it have a comparative advantage? And for that we're asking, in which one is it less bad? And again, here we see that it's very bad at producing soy. Produces only half. A person in Argentina produces only half of what a person in Brazil can produce, whereas in meat it's worse than Brazil, Argentina is, but not so much worse than Brazil. And so we get that Argentina has a comparative advantage in meat production. Brazil has comparative advantage in soy production. Once we figure that out, then we can, and we just need our intuition to do that. And our intuition, if we train it, will be right every time. We can now proceed to look at the gains from trade and the production possibility frontier. So for that we draw the production possibility frontier using the labor availability that we have. So if we go back, we notice that Argentina has 50 laborers available, while Brazil has 100 labor available. So in Argentina, 4 laborers one laborer can make 4 tons of meat. So there's 50 laborers, so they can make 200 tons of meat. One laborer can make 8 tons of soy. So if all the 50 units of labor in Argentina are making soy, they can make 400. So that's where we get these numbers from the production, for drawing the production possibility frontier. So for Argentina, if all the labor is producing meat, then 200 is the maximum amount of meat they can produce, and of course they'd be producing 0 soy, so they'd be at that point in the production space. If, on the other hand, all of this labor, these 50 laborers, went out of the meat sector and went into the soy sector, then the 50 laborers would produce this much soy, 400 soy, because one worker produces 8 soy. So we would be out at this point on the production possibility frontier. We could also ask, well, suppose half of the workers produced meat and half of the workers produced soy, where would we be then? Well, there'd be 25 workers producing meat, and each one produces 4 meat, so they would produce 100 meat, and then 25 workers would be producing soy, and 25 workers each produces 8, so that would be 200 soy. So that point, 200 soy and 100 meat is this point here. And every other division of labor, if we had instead 30 units of labor producing meat and 20 producing soy, we'd be someplace here. If we had 40 producing meat and 10 producing soy, we'd be someplace here. If we had 40 producing soy and 10 producing meat, we'd be somewhere here. So the prediction possibility frontier, the PPF, or the PPC, production possibility curve, is the set of all the production possibilities available to the country where all the labor is employed. There's no idle labor. So we're not going to be at a point inside this production possibility frontier such as here or here, because in those points not all of the labor is being used. Now, if we look at the slope of this production possibility frontier, and remember that the slope of a line is what we call the rise over the run, so it's the change in x over the change in y. The change in y over the change in x. So the rise over the run. It's easy to see that that slope is minus 1/2. It tells us how much meat we get for 1 unit of soy. If we were to give up units of soy, how much meat would we get? That's the slope of the production possibility frontier. So that's the same thing as saying that the price of soy is 1/2 unit of meat. So in some sense, that's what we mean by saying that the opportunity cost of soy, what you need to give up to get 1 unit of soy, is 1/2 unit of meat. The price of soy is how much you have to pay to get a unit of soy, and how much you have to pay is 1/2 unit of meat. That would be the price prevailing in the country in autarky before there is trade. If we look at Brazil, their production possibility frontier is going to look like this. They can produce either 500 meat and 0 soy, or 1600 soy and 0 meat, or points in between, and the slope of this production possibility frontier is approximately 1/3. It's not going to be exactly 1/3. It's 500 over 1600, so approximately 1/3. So the price of soy in Brazil is 1/3 of a unit of meat. So now we see that the price of soy, 1/3 unit of meat, is lower than the price of soy. The price of soy in Brazil, 1/3 unit of meat, is lower than the price of soy in Argentina, which was 1/2 of a unit of meat. So the price of soy is lower in Brazil. In Brazil, soy is cheap. Soybeans are cheap. And that's the same thing as saying that Brazil has a comparative advantage in soybean production, which is what we established by our intuition earlier. Now there's another way to figure out these pre-trade prices or who has comparative advantage, and it's a way that I like to do, and that's to say that in the labor market, the workers have to be indifferent between working in the soy sector and the meat sector if the country is producing both. So the wage has to be the same in the soy sector as in the meat sector. And under perfect competition, which is an assumption this model makes, the wage is equal to the price of soy times the marginal product of labor in the soy industry. The wage is what you get for your work, and it's equal to the value of your marginal product. So that has to be true in Brazil and in Argentina before trade. So a little bit of rearranging tells you that the price of soy relative to the price of meat has to be equal to the marginal product of labor in the meat sector over the marginal product of labor in the soy sector. The marginal product of labor in this case is just how much one worker produces, and that's 4 in the meat sector and 8 in the soy sector for Argentina. And so the price of soy over the price of meat is equal to 1/2, which is just what we found out earlier. So it's another way of showing that. We'll come back and talk about the gains from trade in the next video.